This year's Munich Security Conference is drawing a lot of attention as relations between Europe and the US remain strained. There are a lot of divisions on trade and social media regulations despite recent agreements on defense. The conference will open Friday with remarks by Germany's Chancellor Friedrich Merz and conclude on Sunday. Up to 5,000 police officers will be deployed during the conference. There will also be international support from Austria, Switzerland, France and the Netherlands. And U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has reached Germany to attend the Munich Security Conference. Rubio is leading the U.S. delegation to the high-level security talks in Munich as the Trump government seeks greater burden sharing from Europe, particularly on defense and NATO commitments. Washington, D.C. is expected to press European allies on defense spending, transatlantic unity and free speech concerns. Discussions are also expected to cover the war in Ukraine, ties with Russia and concerns over Europe's tech regulations and free speech policies. And joining us for more is DW's Chiponda Chimbelu in Berlin. Chiponda, what should we expect from this year's conference?
Thanks for having me. Well, since U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance's speech at last year's Munich Security Conference, where he scolded European leaders for not doing enough for their own security, it has been clear that Europe needs to be doing more for its defense and security. And the last 12 months have shown that, with the ceasefire negotiations between Russia and Ukraine, in which the U.S. has left out the European Union, and, of course, the tensions over Greenland. At this year's Munich Security Conference, the highest-ranking U.S. official will be Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Now, relations between the United States and the European Union have deteriorated over the last 12 months. And it is highly unlikely that we can expect to see any major improvements at the Security Conference. And while European leaders have not said as much officially, being more self-reliant in their security means that they need to be less dependent on the US for arms and weapons supply.
Now, when it comes to defense, just how dependent is the EU on the US?
Very dependent. The EU, through NATO, still relies on the United States for the so-called nuclear umbrella as a nuclear deterrent. And just under half, so 46% of the weapons imported into Europe from the year 2000 to 2024 came from the United States. Now, that's according to data from the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute. Now, those figures do not include how much countries spend on defense systems, so items like surveillance systems or even software. So that figure of just under half of weapons imports into the EU being from the US could be an underestimation. It doesn't really capture the extent of the interdependence of Europe's defense on the United States. The US is the world's biggest exporter of arms. For more than 2 decades, it has accounted for more than a third of global arms supply. And Germany and France combined only account for around a sixth. And they are the only 2 EU countries in the top 5 suppliers in the world. So untangling Europe's dependence on the United States as an arms supplier will take years.
All right, Chiponda, we leave it there. Chiponda, thank you. Chiponda Chimbelu reporting there from Berlin.